Who is doing the closed captioning? Hello there.
Yeah, I'm Daniel. I'll be interpreting. It looks like Tracy is doing the captioning.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Tracy's there. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so much. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Constance, Ronaldo, Amanda, if you could unmute as you have presentations to make. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us this wonderful Saturday afternoon as we prepare to have a conversation on why working the polls matter. We hope you're joining us because you want to be an election hero and become a poll worker or just help us protect the vote. Today's event is brought to you by three partners, All Voting Arizona and the Arizona Center for Disability Law. You'll hear a lot more about their work and their support for this particular event, movement, and conversation. Today, we are so fortunate to have Constance Hargrove, Pima County Elections Director, and I will share much more about her as we progress. Today, a couple of norms that you should be aware of. The first is that you'll see and hear whoever is speaking. There's no chat during this presentation, and we are providing sign language and closed captioning through the generous contribution of All Voting Arizona. We're so delighted to have Amanda from the organization to speak about the reason why we're having this event. Okay. We urge all of you to write questions in the Q&A, which will then be moderated by us, or Constance, if you can see the Q&A, you can certainly answer the questions directly. We are recording this event and we'll make it available on the League YouTube, which you can then share. And we're also on Facebook Live. So if you go to the League of Women Voters of Arizona Facebook, you should be joining us at this time. One of the most important things I'd like to leave you with before we get into the subject matter of today's conversation is whatever you learn here, it should leave here. You should be sharing it with everybody. It is so critical for us to get a lot of poll workers, nonpartisan poll workers involved in this effort for the 2022 general election. We want you to encourage your community. So help them become election heroes. And how can they do that? By becoming poll workers or joining our effort to protect the vote as poll monitors through Election Protection Arizona. And we'll have an opportunity to tell you some more about that. I'm going to turn it over to Amanda before we introduce ourselves to talk about why we are here today. Amanda, you're on.
Thank you so much, Penny. My name is Amanda Lugo. My pronouns are she, her, aya, and I'm the Arizona Grassroots Manager with All Voting is Local. We're here today to talk about why working the polls matters. Having a civic engagement workforce that is representative of all Arizonans is important because county election workers from the communities they are serving can make voters feel welcome and comfortable in improving the voting process for all of us. Arizona counties are currently hiring various paid positions for the 2022 general election cycle. Election workers strengthen our election system and ensure that elections are safe and secure and accessible for all Arizonans. They help create a welcoming and enjoyable voting experience. Increasing the diversity of election workers will ensure that poll workers represent all Arizonan voters, which is an essential to a nonpartisan administration of elections. Thank you so much for joining us, and I will hand it back to Penny.
Thank you, Amanda. Our next item is to actually tell you about who we are, the three organizations that have come together to organize these conversations. This is the third in a series. Our very first conversation was with the Maricopa County elections. The second conversations was with Coconino, and we're so fortunate that Constance was available to have this conversation with us. I am Penny Sharan. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Arizona. The League is a 100-year-old organization that is committed to ensuring that democracy works for all. We envision a democracy where every person has the desire, the right, and the knowledge and the confidence to participate. Much of that confidence is bolstered by the kind of work done by poll workers to help voters vote, cast their ballots. For 100 years, we've been nonpartisan. We're an activist grassroots organization. We are also an all-volunteer organization. We have no paid staff, okay? And we believe that voters should play a critical role in the democracy, not just voting, but participating as poll workers, poll monitors, and observers. The League neither supports nor opposes any political party or candidate for elected office. The League is so delighted to have you here at this conversation. I'll turn it over to her to tell us all about All Voting is Arizona now. You've changed the name, and I'm sorry I didn't catch that fast enough.
No, we're All Voting is Local still. My name is Amanda Lugo. I work for All Voting is Local. We are a national organization in Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Georgia, Michigan, and Florida. We fight to remove discriminatory barriers to voting before the next election, empowering communities of color, young people, low-income Americans, and voters with disabilities so that all voices are heard. We use data-driven advocacy tactics and strategic communications to build powerful relationships between constituents, grassroots organizations, legal resources, elected officials, tribal nations, and research organizations. Our priorities are to remove barriers to the ballot, increase voting for eligible voters, ensure fair rules for registering to vote and casting a ballot, and to support the efforts to restore federal protections for the right to vote. Again, my name is Amanda Lugo. I'm the Arizona Grassroots Manager with All Voting is Local, and I'm so delighted to be here with you today.
I am so pleased to have also on this call, helping us with this effort, Ronaldo Fowler from the Arizona Center for Disability Law. Ronaldo, you have the stage.
Okay, thank you, Penny. Yes, my name is Ronaldo Fowler. I'm a senior staff advocate with the Protection and Advocacy Voting Access Coordinator at the Arizona Center for Disability Law. The Arizona Center for Disability Law, ACDL, is a not-for-profit law firm that assists Arizonans with disabilities to promote and protect their legal rights to independence, justice, and equality. ACDL is the protection and advocacy for voting access and works to ensure that Arizonans with disabilities have an opportunity to vote independently and privately and have full access to the electoral process in registering to vote, casting a vote, and accessing polling locations. Our goal at ACDL is to increase voter registration for Arizonans with disabilities, increase voter participation for Arizonans with disabilities, that is casting a vote, increase voter education opportunities for Arizonans with disabilities, and protect the rights of Arizonans with disabilities to ensure access to the electoral process. And we also work very closely with our election officials to address any electoral needs of Arizonans with disability. One of the things I want to say to everyone on election day, ACDL runs an election day hotline to address any accessible issues. If you're a voter with a disability, you experience any accessible issues to access to voting, please give us a call at 602-274-6287, and we'll speak a little more about that later on in this presentation. Thank you for having us, and we look forward to having this great discussion today.
Thank you, Ronaldo. Appreciate your help on these series of conversations we've been having. I'd like to, at this time, introduce to you our main speaker and presenter, and also thank Daniel for the work that he is doing to make our information available to those who need sign language interpretation. Thank you, Daniel, and the coordinator group. We also have Tracy today, who is doing all of the closed captioning, so we'll all be mindful to speak a little slower to make it a little easier for her. Thank you, everybody, for being on this call. I want to ask you all to indulge a little time to learn more about Constance. I did not know this, so I feel the need to share this very important information. Constance is new to Arizona, and we all need to get to know her as quickly as possible because she will be playing such an important role during the 2022 elections and hopefully beyond. So Constance Laverne Hargrove, received her primary and secondary education in Richmond Public School System. So she comes to us from Virginia. Virginia's loss, our gain. She went on to obtain an associate degree in legal assisting from the Sergeant Reynolds Community College, a bachelor's degree in urban studies from Virginia Commonwealth University, yay, Virginia Commonwealth, and a Master of Divinity from Virginia Union University, Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology. She's currently pursuing a master's degree in marriage and family counseling at Capella University. She has worked in elections for past 28 years. She began her career in elections in the city of Richmond as a senior assistant registrar. She served as the deputy general registrar in the city of Richmond from 1995 until 2011. She brings a boatload of experience to this work. Chesterfield County from 2013 to 17, and the general registrar and director of elections from Chesterfield County from 17 to 22. 2017 to 2022. She currently serves as the Director of Elections for Pima County. The launch pad of her career in elections began at the Virginia General Assembly, where she met Alice Lynch while working as secretary to former delegate Franklin P. Hall during the 1994 session. In addition to her 28 years, she is also an ordained minister, and it would be remiss if we didn't also share that she has 2 sons, William and Morris, and she has 7 grandchildren. Constance, I feel that love as a grandmother, She enjoys spending time with her family, especially her grandchildren. I am so delighted that Constance made this time available for all of you to hear as the plans in Pima County. On this call, we have a number of members from Pima County, but this information is invaluable, not just to those who are attending today, but all of the Pima County residents. So once we are done with the recording, it will become available on the League YouTube site, and it is being broadcast live right now on the League Facebook. Constance, without much ado, I would like very much to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Penny. I am going to share my screen with my presentation. Okay. Close a few boxes here. Okay. Okay, as Penny said, I am the Director of Elections for Pima County, Arizona, and I'm delighted to be here. Over the years, working in elections, poll workers have become very near and dear to my heart, as poll workers are the heart and soul of elections. Poll workers are essential to making sure that elections are safe, fair, and secure. There's a lot of work that goes into preparing for elections. There's a lot that we do behind the scenes, but poll workers are the individuals that voters see on election day. They are the face of elections. And I am very, very grateful to each and every person who volunteers. So Pima County hires hundreds of temporary workers for every election, and I dare say thousands of workers for every election. And of course, they are essential to the process. There are many roles of poll workers and those that work behind the scenes on election day, prior to election day, and we support each one of them. And so this is just a list of those individuals who work elections, and there are different boards. So poll workers are actually the election board that serves on election day. So we have the election board, the receiving center board, troubleshooters, early board, duplication board, center receiving, provisional and inspection board, and hand count audit board. So all of these boards are essential to what we do on election day. So election day poll workers, the election board consists of the inspector, the marshal, the judge of the same party as the inspector, the judge of the opposite party of the inspector, clerks, and equipment specialists, which are actually clerks. But as of August 2022, I created the position of equipment specialist to make sure that the new technology that we use on election day can be handled quickly, and that someone would be there as a subject matter expert to assist when things needed to be troubleshooted. The requirements to be a poll worker: you must be a registered voter in Pima County. You can be a student, so students are not 18 years old, so they are not necessarily registered voters. So students can work in vote centers as clerks. You cannot be a candidate in the election or the spouse, child, or parent of a candidate. There must be equal distribution of parties represented in vote centers. Even though poll workers are nonpartisan and they work as a nonpartisan board, because we're not favoring one party over the other, these statutes do require that we have equal representation of the two largest political parties in the state. And right now that is Democrat and Republican. We do appoint other parties. The Libertarian Party is a recognized party in Arizona. We do appoint individuals from the Libertarian Party. We also have individuals who serve that are not registered with any party. These individuals most of the time serve as our clerks because the statutes do not require that they be one party or the other. So as an example, in a vote center, we would have an inspector who is a Democrat and a marshal who's a Republican. The judge of the same party would also be a Democrat, and then the judge of the opposite party would be a Republican, which gives us our equal representation in that vote center. And then we can have as many clerks as we need on election day. Now, it is important to note that with the new technology that we have, I made a decision to add additional judges to our vote centers. So instead of having just one judge of the same party of the inspector and one judge of the opposite party of the inspector, each vote center has judges that equal the number of e-poll books, and I'll explain that. E-poll books in each vote center. So if a vote center has a minimum of 3 e-poll books, then they have a minimum of 3 judges of the same party and a minimum of 3 judges of the opposite party in that vote center, in addition to the inspector and the marshal who represent opposite parties. And then we would have as many clerks as we need in those vote centers. So the duties of the board, election day board, we require, beginning with the August primary, that boards set up their equipment the night before the election. So we call that Monday night setup. The Monday night setup is a requirement, and it's very important with the new technology in the vote centers. And I'll just take some time right now just to explain that new technology. Beginning with the August 2nd, 2022 primary election, Pima County went from precinct voting to vote centers. With precinct voting, each voter had to go to their assigned precinct to cast their ballot on election day. With vote centers, voters are able to go to any vote center that they choose. They can vote anywhere. They can vote if they're out shopping, they can show up at a vote center near where they're shopping. If they're picking their children up from school, they can vote at the vote center near that school. And they're not restricted to just one location anymore. They have many locations that they can now vote at. With the change to vote centers, it also requires us to change the technology that we use and to add additional technology to vote centers to ensure that voting was secure and that each voter would only be allowed to cast a vote one time. So with that, we added electronic poll books, and we refer to them as e-poll books. So we have electronic poll books in our vote centers, and we have ballot on demand printers in our vote centers as well. So the e-poll books have a copy of the voter registration list, which used to be in paper form. Now everything is electronic. All of that information is housed on the e-poll book on election day. That is how we verify and check in voters. Voters sign on the e-poll book just as voters would sign the register on election day. It's all now done electronically. Once the signature is captured and that voter is processed, it then initiates a ballot. So the ballot for that voter is then printed automatically. Once they're checked in, it's printed on the ballot on demand printer. And so with the new technology, we added the position of equipment specialist, and I added the additional judges of the same party, which we will refer to as JSPs, judges of the opposite party, which we refer to as JOPs, and then clerks that actually work at the printer. So these officers, the entire board, show up at 5 a.m. on election day. They prepare the vote center, and then they check in voters throughout the day on the e-poll books. And the e-poll books ensures that the voter gets the correct ballot, and the judge of the opposite party is actually the one that hands out that ballot on election day. At the end of the day, we close the polls at 7 p.m., prepare reports that verify the number of ballots cast to the number of individuals checked in on the poll book, and then the supplies are returned to our receiving centers at the end of the night. So the inspector serves as the head of the election board. Basically, the inspector is the supervisor and the main point of contact with our office when they call the hotline, and the troubleshooters that are assigned to their locations on election day. They ensure that the equipment is functioning properly, and they are responsible, along with the marshal, for returning the ballots and supplies to the receiving center at the end of the night. The marshal is the individual who announces that the polls are open and that the polls are closed. The marshal also preserves order within the 75-foot limit of the vote center, which means that no electioneering, anyone with campaign literature, any candidates, any voter that is not actually voting, none of those individuals are allowed inside the 75-foot limit of the vote center. In addition, no pictures, photographs can be taken inside a vote center, which means that the press cannot come in and film during election day. So the marshal is responsible for making sure that that 75-foot prohibited area is maintained throughout the day. They also perform other duties of poll workers if poll workers need to take a break. The judges that I referred to earlier, the judges issue ballots, they check in voters on the poll book, they examine, of course, the equipment to make sure that their check-ins are correct. The equipment specialist is the individual, the clerk assigned to assist the vote center with making sure all equipment is functioning properly. They troubleshoot any problems that happen on election day. So those are the individuals that actually work inside the vote centers for the elections department on election day. And individuals can go to our website and apply to be a poll worker. or they can call the office directly at 520-724-6830. Now, it is important to note that we begin assigning poll workers at least 2 months to 3 months ahead of each election. And so right now we are in the final stages of assigning poll workers for the November general election. And the reason why we do that and try to have that list finalized earlier is because we are required to submit that list to the Board of Supervisors no more than 20 days, no less than 20 days prior to each election. And so in order to do that, we have to get that list on an agenda for the Board of Supervisors meeting. And so the deadline to get the list of workers for the November general election on that agenda is actually next Friday. So we have to make sure that our list is accurate, up to date, and that each location is filled with the poll workers that we need. Each poll worker receives training prior to each election. That training session usually runs about 2 hours now, and the sessions are broken out into 2 parts. The first part would be the process that the poll workers go through on election day, helping them to understand how to check in voters, what they are required to have when they come in to vote, which IDs they should have, how to maintain order in the vote center, and many different responsibilities that they have. So that is the first part of the class. The second part of the class is where the poll workers are trained on the new technology and the equipment that we use on election day. And then they have some time at the end of that where they can do hands-on practice of that equipment. So poll worker affiliation, all poll workers list their party when applying for the position. So if you are going to apply to be a poll worker, you are required to tell us which party you are affiliated with. And the important thing to remember is if you're going to be a poll worker, especially an inspector, marshal, or judge, you cannot change your party affiliation between elections. So if you were a Democrat in 2020, you cannot have changed your party affiliation prior to the 2022 general election. If you do, you cannot serve as an inspector, judge, or marshal. We can use you as a clerk, but you cannot change your party affiliation. And so we try to make sure that there is an equitable distribution of each party represented at every vote center. So when the polls close on election day, poll workers are required to complete paperwork and take down all of the equipment. When the ballots are counted and secured, they are transferred to what is called a receiving station. And the receiving station gives them a document where they're to indicate that they have now transferred chain of custody of the ballots and other equipment to them election night, and then the receiving station transfers that custody to our office. And so a receiving station is a central location where vote centers that are assigned to that receiving station take their ballots and equipment that they need to turn in on election night. Troubleshooters are assigned to zones on election day, and troubleshooters are there to either provide additional supplies or equipment that may be needed to vote centers, as well as to assist with troubleshooting any of the technology that is in the vote center on election day. They also assist poll workers with other issues if they have questions. So the troubleshooters are a direct link to each vote center on election day. In the early boards are individuals that we hire through the county hiring process. So the difference between poll workers and election board workers is that poll workers are not required to go through the county hiring process where you actually have to fill out a county application, go through a recruitment process, go through an interview process, and then get hired. So poll workers essentially just complete the application online. The individuals in the office contact the individuals to assign them to a vote center, and then they work. Whereas early boards, troubleshooters, and the other boards are actually county employees that have to go through a different process to submit an application and to be hired on election day. And so the early boards is the first board that we look at, and early boards process early ballots. So the individuals who are on the active early voting list receive their ballots in the mail. So those individuals are the ones that the early boards are processing. When those ballots come back to the recorder's office, the recorder checks, verifies signatures, and then they turn the ballots over to the elections department, which is my department. We then have a board that goes through, checks the affidavits on those early ballots, make sure that there's only one ballot in the envelope, and they process them and get them ready to be tabulated or counted. Any ballots that the early board determine are spoiled somehow, maybe they have coffee on them, maybe there's some additional stray marks on them where the scanner cannot actually count them, they then separate those ballots, and those ballots are turned over to the duplication board. The duplication board takes those ballots, and there are always two individuals from opposite political parties working on these boards. So the early boards, whenever they're opening an envelope, there are two individuals there of opposite parties. The duplication board is the same way. And so the duplication board actually takes the ballots and they look at them and they create a new ballot with the exact same options and candidates that the voter has selected, but they create a new ballot that can then be scanned by the voting equipment. Then we have our central receiving, provisional, and inspection boards. So these boards are boards that only work on election night. They do not work any other days. The early boards work from the time that we receive early ballots from the recorder's office until after the election, because individuals can drop off early ballots on election day. So they are still needed after the election to process those. However, the central receiving, provisional, and inspection board are only needed on election night. Central receiving is in the elections office. Each vote center returns their supplies and ballots to a receiving station. Those receiving stations in turn bring the ballots and supplies back to central receiving, where there is a board that checks those documents in, receives the ballots, receives the equipment, verifies that we received everything, signs off on a document to say that custody has now been transferred to the central receiving board. From the central receiving board then sorts out the provisional ballots, early ballots, and hands them to the provisional board that goes through and certifies that what the vote center says they received is actually what is in the envelope. So they open the envelopes, they count them, they verify that the number is correct for both provisional and early ballots, and then they prepare them to go to the recorder's office the next day for processing. The inspection board comes in with the ballot process. So the ballots that are voted on election day are in a ballot box with a document that indicates how many ballots were actually cast and how many voters were checked in into the e-poll books on election day. That document, along with the ballots, go to an inspection board that reviews the form that was completed to make sure that they did put all the information on there that is necessary. And they actually verify that the number of ballots in the ballot container match what the vote center said was actually cast in the vote center. And so that is the inspection board. So all of these boards work on election night. And then the hand count audit is an interesting board. So the hand count audit board is actually consists of individuals appointed by the political parties. So essentially, we are the facilitators of the hand count audit, whereas the parties really provide the individuals who handle the ballots and count the ballots during the hand count audit. And so that would be the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, and the Libertarian Party. And they are all invited to provide enough individuals to actually go conduct this audit the Saturday after the election. So the election is held on Tuesday, and then on Saturday, we have the hand count audit. They are responsible for making sure that the tabulator was accurate, that it tabulated the ballots correctly. And so they're hand counting these to verify that what was actually counted and the results that we received from the voting equipment is accurate. And that is their job with the hand count audit. Then we do hire a board that assists with the hand count audit. And basically they're the ones there with the information of how many ballots were actually cast and the information from the scanners. They have that information. They do not share that information with the individuals counting until they have come up with the right number. Or if the number does not match for some reason, then they then document that and then they move forward. So right now, the election worker pay is $200 for the inspector, $175 for the marshal, $155 for judges and clerks. Troubleshooters receive $300 for the day. The receiving center workers receive $120, and the central receiving, provisional, and inspection workers, they receive $160 for the day. More than likely, the central receiving, provisional, and inspection board are county employees. Early and duplication boards, the intermittent employees, they're paid hourly, and the hand count audit board, the individuals who are actually counting the ballots, they receive $75. These are the party individuals, and the individuals who are actually helping with the coordination receive $200 for that day. So we have 129 vote centers in Pima County. And at the time I created this PowerPoint, there were roughly around 1,400 workers. So during the August primary, we used 1,400 poll workers on election day. However, that number has increased over the past few weeks, and we are going to use roughly 1,600 poll workers on election day. Each site must have a minimum of 5 workers, and we can have up to as many as 14 poll workers, depending on the size of the vote center. We have approximately 30 to 40 troubleshooters, approximately 50 receiving station workers, and approximately 100 central receiving, provisional, and inspection workers. So there are a lot of people and moving pieces on election day. Each election, there are also observers. The observers are not employees of the election department. The observers are appointed by the chairperson of each political party. and they submit names of these observers to our office. Only one observer per party is allowed at each vote center. These observers may observe the opening and closing of the vote center, the voting process, as well as the transport and transfer of custody of the ballots to the receiving station. Observers may not speak to voters on election day. They may not interfere with the voting process. They can only speak to the inspector on election day. They cannot use any technology to take pictures. They can take notes and write any notes that they need to write, but they are not employees of the county. They are not conducting the election. They are not running the election. Their sole purpose is to observe for the political parties to make sure that the process is being run fairly and that the votes, the ballots are being issued properly. That is their job on election day. However, if they see something that is concerning or they see something that may disenfranchise a voter, then they may speak with the inspector and let the inspector know that there is a problem. In addition, these observers report back to a central location, and hopefully and preferably as we move into the general election, the elections department will receive real-time information about vote centers that may be having some issues, that maybe there is some disenfranchisement of voters going on unintentionally, and that we can address and make sure that voting is smooth for everyone. Okay, so that is an overview of what poll workers we have. I'm going to stop sharing now. That's an overview of the poll workers that we have for election day, an overview of the individuals who work prior to election day, and basically what they do. The important thing to remember is that if you are interested in being a poll worker, that you submit your application. Please do not be discouraged if you're not contacted immediately for the general election, because we may have all the individuals that we need for the general election, but we will keep your name on file because we always need poll workers, and we will contact you after the election to get you into a training class, to get you set up with a vote center to prepare us for 2024, because 2024 is coming a lot quicker than we actually think. So we need to be prepared for that. And that I'll take any questions if you have any. And Penny, I can check.
Yeah, so yeah, the first question I'd like to pose to you as others prepare their question is that one of our members, one of our attendees said they submitted an application on August 22nd. They got an email that the application was received, but I have not heard anything back. Do they need to do anything?
They do not need to do anything at this time. What possibly could have happened is, depending on which party they are representing, whether it's the Democratic or the Republican Party, we may not need any workers right now for that party. I will say that there are definitely vote centers that we need workers in, and those specific vote centers are in the Sells area on the nation, and we have a very difficult time finding Republican poll workers for those vote centers. So if there is anyone interested in working in that area, let's see, then we would definitely love to have you. And there are a few other vote centers that we need Republican workers in, but the ones that we need Democratic workers in that are key are vote centers 104, vote center 88, vote center 34, and vote center 32. And we seem to have a hard time sometimes getting Democratic workers in those vote centers, but the ones on the Nation in the Souls area, we have a difficult time getting Republican workers.
Constance, on that front, I'd like to have you clarify for a couple of things that you stated that might be helpful. One is that you said we don't need more workers in a particular party, but my question is it because you have the right balance for all of the poll, not just for the marshal and the marshal, the judge, and the inspector, but for the clerks also? Because in the clerks, it's not required that you correct. So are you saying all slots are filled?
The majority of the slots are filled, yes. So it's a very few, we have a very few vote centers that we actually need workers in.
Okay, so then, which is great news. That's wonderful news, except that you have pockets where you need people in order to keep that balance for those 3 slots. So then the question I have is that, is it possible that as you make your selection, maybe the individuals that have applied and haven't heard back are in poll centers that where you don't have a need, but maybe are willing to work in the poll centers where you do have a need? I know in Maricopa County, I've done this for a number of years, and sometimes they'll say, we'll put you somewhere close to where you are. And, you know, many of us will say, it doesn't matter, take me wherever you need me, you know. Is that a possibility, that kind of messaging back to the individual, or however you manage that in the back end?
Absolutely. That is one of the things that they are doing when they contact the individuals. They ask if they're willing to travel. Most people are willing to travel about 20 minutes, but we need them to travel roughly an hour to get to the Nation most of the time. And that is very challenging.
Okay. Let's see. Ronaldo, maybe you can ask some questions, and then Amanda, because I know we always have questions as the organizers for Constance. So maybe that'll trigger our audience to also ask some questions. So Ronaldo, you go first, and then Amanda. Mute if you don't mind, Ronaldo.
Constance, thank you. One of the things that I'm interested in, maybe it's done to the recorder's office, your special election board, that is a resource that's used by a lot of voters with disabilities. I know you didn't really touch on that. Is that your office, or is that through the recorder's office that handles the special election board that will come out to the voter themselves and help them cast a vote? So could you touch upon that a little bit? That's my first question. And my second question I have for you is that you have mentioned on election day about you have these troubleshooters, you have staff. One of the things that we do, Constance, we work with Maricopa County. We have an actual email, and I have some phone numbers. If I identify through my hotline in Pima County, let's give an example. One of the vote centers, the machine wasn't on, and someone in contact our office. I think it would be helpful for me to have direct contact with someone in your office. Say, hey, I got a call from this vote center. Here's a particular problem around accessibility. So I would encourage you to do that. And third, security at your count centers, at your centers when you take the ballots back. We've seen a few breaches of security lately reported at centers where people count. Could you touch upon that in terms of security? Not talk about your security, but just reinforce everyone out there that your vote centers are secure, and you will not have people in certain areas that are not supposed to be there. So those are my 3 questions for you, Constance.
Sure, thank you. Thank you. So the special boards, that is definitely the recorder's office, because they deal with the early ballots and getting ballots out to individuals. Okay. So that is the recorder's office. The direct link to our office, I could email you the information, but that direct contact would be myself or my deputy on election day. so that we can address those issues for you. I
Okay.
did hear that there wasn't one of the accessible machines was not on. That is something we need to make sure vote centers and poll workers understand, that you need to set this equipment up even if no one shows up to use it.
Right. And what happens sometimes, Constance, is those machines time out and the person someone comes in, they don't know how to set it back up. So that's an ongoing process throughout the state. So that's something just to kind of keep in mind. Thank you.
And can you clarify, you said counting centers?
Or actually where you take the ballots in and you do the official counting, the secure location where things are kept.
Oh, absolutely. So
that's what I mean. Where you take the ballots where they're counted. That's kind of what I'm talking about.
Yes. So once the inspection board, which is at our office, completes their verification, those ballots are transferred to our counting room, which is also in our office. And the only individuals allowed inside the counting room are the board that actually is working the scanners and the political parties that are there observing. Of course, my staff can be inside the counting room. And so those ballots are counted and they are put back into those secure containers and locked and sealed. And they stay in a locked and sealed room before and after they're counted until they're transferred to the treasurer for storage. That room, counting room, it also has 24/7 live stream that anyone can watch if they wanted to see what is happening in the counting room. And we have cameras in other areas as well, where you can see the process as it is unfolding.
I had a question, but I think Dee has one in the chat that for the sake of time is just a little more important than mine. Dee is asking us, there was an NPR report that one party encouraging poll workers to be hyper challenging and call 911 for anything suspicious. Do you have a concern?
Poll workers are observers. We don't know, right? It may be that they are encouraging observers. A lot of time people get observers and poll workers confused. So the parties have individuals that they call poll workers, which actually they're outside the vote center, outside the 75-foot prohibited area. But the observers inside the vote center work for the parties as well. They may be encouraging them to call the police or someone if they see something. But they cannot challenge voters inside the vote center. They will be asked to leave. And if they are not willing to leave on their own, then the inspector is encouraged to call the police to have them be removed from the vote center. So I am not concerned about that. We will, of course, alert our poll workers so that they are vigilant and watching for anyone who may try to disrupt the voting process.
And I want to weigh in on this because I think it's important for us to hear from our the Constance and Scott and everybody else on this. I think Dee's question is, it was pretty clear in that interview. They were talking about poll workers. And I might also want to say this, that I think the confusion is often between poll monitors and poll observers. And that's that, you know, and a lot of us are trying to make that clear. And I would like to bring this up for the audience and for you, and Ronaldo and Amanda have heard me speak on this issue before, which is that there are poll workers that are coming into your offices and into McCounty and so on and applying as poll workers that are also being trained prior to the official training, where they are actually being told to challenge the inspector. And, you know, and I say this to you in having members who are observing and attending some of that training that are bringing in this intel to say, this is what's going on. And so I want to elevate that, as Ronaldo and Amanda and I have been conversing in other groups, because There is not an uncommon experience, Constant, that happened in the primaries, where actually poll workers who are very, and I'm sure you all do the same thing we do in Maricopa, is they're instructed very clearly not to call the hotline or not to call the troubleshooter without escalating it through the inspector. And we saw a lot of that happening where the poll workers came in with the if they thought that the inspector was from a different party, came in with the intention of interfering and so on. There was an incident where a particular poll worker, that is the clerk that's working in the printing area, decided to call the troubleshooter, call the hotline, because that IT tech support individual was touching the machines.
Mhm.
And so I don't
Yeah.
think we should minimize this, because we
Right.
expect this to be escalated. And so it is not necessarily the external causing disruption. It could be within the poll workers, and it needs to be emphasized in all poll worker training, the chain of command and who makes that decision.
Absolutely. Okay, I am definitely clear with that. Yes, that is not uncommon. I knew that that was the goal in August when poll workers were appointed, and even an inspector contacted me with concerns about one of her poll workers who'd said something prior to election day that was concerning for her. And so, yes, we are definitely training the poll workers, letting them know that, number one, some of that can be considered as electioneering. However, challenging the inspector, we have instructed the inspectors and marshals that you can dismiss a poll worker from the vote center. Contact us when you do it, but dismiss that poll worker. And if the poll worker is not willing to leave, we did have a poll worker escorted out by the police during the primary election. So I am aware of some of that. The majority of the poll workers were great. They may have had some questions, but the inspector was able to get them under control and they could continue to work with them. But those poll workers that were disruptive were actually dismissed and asked to leave on election day. And we only had to have one escorted out by the police. So yes, thank you for that question. And yes, we are aware of that, and we did address those situations in the primary.
So Constance, I'm going to stay on that topic for just one more piece to ask for some sort of assurances, not assurances, but sort of to elevate this piece. Really glad that, you know, the poll workers are being trained to understand the chain of command. But my question to you is, do we have backups? Because if we have to walk someone out, then, and I share this because in a couple of the instances when the inspector called the hotline, they were told, well, try to get along, you know, when it was clearly an individual that had plans to. So how do you have because there was an issue of not having enough backups. Okay. So what are you doing to prepare for backups? Because I think the primary was a test run. How are we going to handle it in 2020 in the general election?
Absolutely. So every vote center has, of course, three poll books, right? And so those 3 poll books are staffed by 2 judges. So we have a minimum of 6 judges, and for most vote centers, a minimum of 2 clerks. If we had to, we could always take one poll book offline, and we could have extra people. We could take one of the clerks from the printer, and then we could have someone extra. So there is some cushion built into the vote centers where if somebody needed to be removed or someone just did not show up on election day, that the vote center could still run.
Thank you, Constance. Amanda, I don't see much in the Q&A, but do you have some questions? It's about 2 o'clock and we had planned to keep it at 60 minutes. But if you have a question we have not asked that would be helpful to Constance and our participants, it'll be great if you could introduce that.
Constance, if you could just talk a little bit about the student opportunities that are with Pima County, that would be great. I run a youth fellowship program, and we have some students in Pima County that might be interested.
Absolutely. So for vote centers, we do appoint students 16 and up to vote centers to work on election day. Of course, they have to get permission from the schools to take the day off from schools, but they can work as a clerk and be trained on an election day as a poll worker. So anyone who's interested, we recommend they contact us, or they can also submit an application online. Hopefully I will be able to, not before the general election, but after the general election, have someone who can just kind of maintain that student population and even do some outreach to schools to make sure that we do get some students in to work, to learn the process and to become poll workers. We need younger poll workers. So I'm excited about that. I know we're out of time, but there was one thing that question that you presented, Penny, was about an oath. Yes, every poll worker must take an oath and sign that document on election day. And it is important that poll workers understand that there is a criminal penalty for doing things inside the vote center that are not right. They can be charged with a crime. And as well as if they sign up to be a poll worker, go through training, and for reasons that are not important, decide the day before the election that they're not going to work, they're not fulfilling their duties at that point as a poll worker. So if a county wanted to go after them, they do have the ability to charge them with a misdemeanor for doing that.
Wow, that is new information, because some of the poll workers, that's good information. So when we recruit people, we want to make sure they know that if you've signed up and signed on, you better show up. Just don't sign up. Okay, great. That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for elevating that point. Constance, this is Saturday. You gave up a Saturday to make this amazing, excellent presentation. It was really comprehensive. And each time we hear this, I know Amanda and Ronaldo, we learned so much from it. Our audience is learning a lot from this. This recording will be made available to everybody through YouTube. Everyone who registered for this for this meeting will get a follow-up email with contacts and information on how to get involved with the Pima County Elections Department. Thank you all for being with us this Saturday afternoon. Thank you, Ronaldo. Thank you, Amanda. Great partners in this work we're doing together. And thank you so much, elections directors across the counties, for staying so rooted in the principles of making sure everybody can vote. Bye, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.